All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ole Miss After Dark. Me and Hitch are here with you to preview the upcoming game with the Ole Miss Rebels traveling to Gainesville, Florida to take on the Gators, team that's playing pretty well right now. Billy's done a good job down there in Gainesville keeping these guys engaged, not quitting on them. They're playing hard, and they've got a sure shit quarterback there, freshman DJ Lagway. I know he's a little beat up. He's not running around like he normally does. A little bit of a statue back there. I think that'll play into Ole Miss's favor a little bit as the game goes on with how good we are getting to the quarterback. We'll hit all that as well. But Hitch, I appreciate you doing this with me, buddy. How you doing today?
Good, man. Good. Hey, I'm no superstar Zach Morris or anything, but if you need me to get on here and say that the Rebels are going to win, I can do that for you.
There you go. Well, look. See, last time I had Zach on here, he actually said Ole Miss was going to lose to Georgia. So,
Zach,
if you're at least going to tell me they're going to win, then that at least brings the vibes up a little bit. But to be fair, I think Zach would also say that we would beat Florida. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. Yeah, we'll go ahead and dive into it here. Ole Miss going on the road. Look, this is a situation where if Ole Miss wins 2 football games, they're in the college football playoff. That was the goal all along this year. Talked about it in the preseason. As the season played out, got a little rocky there. Lost to Kentucky, losing at LSU, but they've done one hell of a job battling back and not dropping another game since, particularly with that Georgia game that really got us back into the race. And now you look at the college football playoff rankings that came out Tuesday. We're going to hit that at the end of the show. But what those told me was Ole Miss is in with 2 wins, and this is the first hurdle going down to Gainesville. And I remember the last time we went to Gainesville, Hitch, mainly because I drove down there to watch that shit show that day, or night, I believe it was actually, with the roided up Will Greer in at quarterback, his last appearance as a Florida Gator before he got suspended for the remainder of the year for using steroids. And Hugh Freeze did what he always does. He drops the game he wasn't supposed to. Ole Miss ranked number 4 in the country at that point, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm remembering right, all the way back in 2014, 15, whatever year that was. Really disappointing night. I expect this to be a much different game, though. This Ole Miss team is really hitting its stride at the right time. The defense, we keep talking about it week over week over week. And a lot of folks is put on the offensive side of the ball when it comes to really good football teams. But Ole Miss is in this position because of their defense, because of their ability to get after the quarterback. I don't know if you've seen it or not. They are on pace for historical numbers from a pressure and sack standpoint. I believe we're on pace to have the most sacks of anybody in college football in a season since like 2004 or something like that. Like we're looking to hit that mark over these last couple games. And then the most pressures by any team in college football in a single season since like 2000 or 2002, something like that. So this front is going to pin their ears back. And again, while DJ Lagway is this really talented freshman, you saw it last week against LSU, some of the throws he made, you just thought, oh my God, this guy's arm is legit. He's going to be the real deal. But he can really move with his legs. But with that hamstring injury he suffered back a few weeks ago, he was more of a statue back there behind that offensive line. I expect Ole Miss's defense to pin their ears back, get pressure on him, and make him make a few mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the recipe for success there, especially with this dominant defensive line that we have. It does surprise me, those historic numbers that you're talking about there, because when you go look at the numbers for the last few weeks, it feels like it's 10 sacks, 17 tackles for loss, every other week. And don't expect much different tomorrow, especially with, like you said, the quarterback probably not moving around very well. I think these guys are really going to pin their ears back and go after him.
Yeah, and there's one defensive end in particular for Ole Miss that has really had a good year. Princely Umanmielen obviously didn't play in that LSU game. Lane references that all the time, every time he talks about that game. Probably would have been a little different, you would think, if he was playing in Baton Rouge that night. But he will be playing in Gainesville, and there's probably going to be a little motivation him going back to that school, wanting to put on the show for the former hometown crowd.
Yeah, I mean, just you said it with he didn't play against LSU, and that is the outlier when you look at the defensive numbers, right? No pressure on Nussmeier, and we lose that game, right? a game we probably should have won. If he's in there, we get pressure, we win. So I'm assuming that he's listed as probable on the injury report, which we can talk about that in a little while. But I would assume that he's probably pretty fired up to step on the field.
Yeah. I think he's going to be out there and he's going to raise a lot of hell once he does. And then before we switch over to the offensive side of the ball, I do want to give a shout out to TJ Dodery and Pooh Paul. Those two guys at linebacker have been absolutely studs for us. We've talked about it several times on this show. I'm going to keep talking about it as long as they're performing the way that they are. And it's all because of that front, right? That front keeps the offensive linemen from getting to the second level. The linebackers stay clean, and they can sit back there and they can hunt running backs whenever they get into the hole. And they've done a great job. That's the biggest reason Ole Miss is one of the top teams in the country against the run.
Yeah, I saw a tweet last night sitting out in the garage. It said, Chris Paul could come back. And I was just like, oh, well, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, that sure would be something. And I'm sure he would come very, very cheap for the Rebels too. No NIL money would be needed there, right, to keep him out of the draft. I mean, I think he has really done wonders for his draft stock. Played a really, really good linebacker for the Rebels so far this year.
Every time I'm asked, I always round up to the nearest dollar to give it to the Grove Collective. So, I mean, I'm doing my part. Somebody else step up and do their part. Come on.
Yeah. Y'all keep rounding up out there. Keep giving to the Grove Collective. Let's get Pooh Paul back for one more year. We'll go ahead and kick that off right here on Ole Miss After Dark.
I mean, we probably need probably more than just rounding up from some people. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. But look, in this offense, obviously there's questions at the running back position. Lane referenced Logan Diggs potentially making a return, said he had his best week of practice. Does that mean he plays? I have no idea. Quite frankly, I don't take a whole lot of what Lane says seriously when it comes to injuries one way or another, even as optimistic as he was about Trey Harris. Kind of in I'll believe it when I see it mode with him. But I do kind of expect him to play because they keep talking about how close he is each and every week. He's been dressed out for the last couple of weeks now. He's returned to the sideline after halftime in street clothes both games, but at least he was dressed out beforehand. Now, maybe that was a little bit of gamesmanship by Lane Kiffin or whatever, but we'll see if he ends up playing. But this offense is really going really well right now. Jackson Dart is playing at an elite level quarterback, leading the country in passing. Was it 22, 23, 24 touchdowns, whatever it is, only 4 interceptions, really taking care of the ball, making really good decisions back there and finding the open man.
Yeah, I mean, you said it with the decisions. And it really feels like, I think that Oklahoma game, the couple of games before that, it really felt like the pressure was getting to him. And when I say pressure, I don't mean the pressure. I mean the actual physical pressure from the defensive line and backpedaling and throwing off his back foot, not getting a lot on the ball. And it really feels like just as you said at the beginning with this team, like they're really starting to click at the right time. And man, the past couple of games, he's looked really, really good. And whether that comes from him being more confident or him getting more protection, whatever that is, I don't see that slowing down here. Now, I do have a question, right? When I look at Florida's box score last week against LSU, just out of nowhere, you get 7 sacks, 11 tackles for losses on an offensive line that I've heard is maybe the best in the country. Is that concerning, or is that a product of LSU just laying down and quitting and just giving up?
I think both are true, quite frankly. I do think LSU, for whatever reason, they appeared to be in some form of quit mode, even though they still had packed the SEC championship game, which would have led to the playoff for them if they won that. But, body language standpoint, it did seem like they were kind of laying down. But at the same time, this is a good defensive front for Florida. They've got players. They've got tons of talent over there and athletes on that side of the ball. And they showed it last Saturday against LSU. And even though the Ole Miss offensive line has played so well ever since that night game in Baton Rouge. We get that bye week. Kiffin talked about going in, changing things up, and particularly fixing the offensive line. They obviously went in there. They did a really good job during that bye week doing that. Start with that Oklahoma game all the way up until now. It's been a completely different offensive line. Protection has been really, really good, but it doesn't really get out of your head that if there is a way to stop this Ole Miss offense, it is attacking that offensive line, finding a way to maybe getting them to resort back to some of their past ways where they couldn't keep guys off of Dart, where Dart was having to throw off of his back foot. And I think that's going to be a focus for Florida, obviously, coming up on Saturday. They want to speed Dart up. They want to, like you said, throw off of his back foot. Affects accuracy, gets the ball floating, and every time the ball starts floating, then that's the potential for interceptions and turnovers. If Ole Miss doesn't turn the ball over on Saturday, we win this game by 3 scores, running away. I don't think there's any doubt about it. But it's all going to start up front with that offensive line. So I think it's a little bit of both to answer your question.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you said it because I think the key for Ole Miss on Saturday is third down on both sides. Right? I think Florida, because when I look at Florida on PFF, whatever the matchup, there's a big discrepancy in the average snaps. Right, Ole Miss wants to go fast, 77 offensive snaps a game. When you get Florida, it's 63. So my immediate thought was I think Florida's going to try to play defense by playing offense a little bit. Right, keep the ball out of Ole Miss's hand, try to milk the play clock the entire game. They're going to try to hold on to the ball. And so I think third down becomes important, right? We have to keep them behind the chains on third down, on first and second down. And then on third down, we have to be able to get them off the field. And probably I would assume the defense has had turnovers in a few games in a row here, maybe a turnover too. I agree with you that we probably win big. But I think the key is going to be third down on both sides. We're going to have to, just like you said, they're going to try to speed Jackson Dart up because they're wanting to make decisions quickly, bad decisions, and we can't afford 3 and outs, and we need to get off the field on third down on defense. That's going to be the key, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about the pace of play. Did you see the discrepancy in plays run between LSU and Florida last Saturday?
I didn't.
Did you not? Oh my gosh, it was like 93 to 45 or something like that. It was ridiculous.
Time possession in itself is 42 to 19 or 42 to 18.
Yeah. LSU ran so many more plays than they did, but Florida still won by a couple of touchdowns. That was one of the weirdest stats of that game there. So it was interesting you had brought that up because it's definitely the formula Florida wants to use because they're not a team that's going to sustain drives. They've shown that over and over again. Now they'll hit you with the big plays. They'll try to create a mistake defensively, and if they can't, they're going to try to hit the big play offensively and score quick. But they're not going to sit there and put together a 10 to 12 play drive and drive it down the field and go score. So that's definitely the way that they're going to try to play this. Probably bring the blueprint from that game last Saturday back to this one against Ole Miss, I would imagine. Let's shift gears a little bit here. We got the first injury report out. Like I said, I don't put a lot of stock into these, but I still look at them just from an interest level. Hitch, what does that injury report show for this coming up Saturday?
That everybody is probable except for people I've never heard of, and Logan Diggs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What does he have Diggs listed at? Questionable? Oh, yeah. Yeah, there you go. Lane pointed him out, saying that he had the best week of practice since he had gotten there. Obviously, he had torn his ACL back in January in the bowl game for LSU. Lane talked up Trey Harris as if he was going to play. He made it sound certain, and I hope it's true.
He's probable.
Yeah. I mean, that would obviously be a big boost. Now I did hear about Caden Lee getting healthier. He was beat up a little bit the last couple of weeks. His bye week really seemed to come at the right time. Lane even mentioned it's the first time all year that their entire offensive line is healthy as well, which I think is interesting because Jaden Williams has been dressed out and presumably healthy the last 2 weeks. And before he got hurt, he had been our best offensive lineman. by a wide margin. And I'm not sure he's played a snap since he's gotten back. So be interesting to see if he starts incorporating Jaden Williams in there, maybe giving some of these offensive linemen a little bit of a breather if we are as healthy as Lane claims we are.
Yeah, agreed.
So that'll be interesting to see. Obviously, we'll be keeping our eye on that, making sure hopefully Trey Harris is out there and playing this coming Saturday against Florida. Before we get out of here, we will hit the college football playoff rankings. They came out on Tuesday night, obviously. I'm not going to go through all of them because, quite frankly, all of them don't matter. But the way it sits as of today, Oregon #1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Indiana 5, Notre Dame 6, Alabama 7, Miami 8, Ole Miss 9, Georgia 10, Tennessee 11, Boise State 12, SMU 13, BYU 14, and Texas A&M 15. Anything beyond 15, there are teams that can kind of ruin the party a little bit. Obviously, Colorado is still in the mix in the Big 12 at 16, along with Arizona State at number 21. They also control their own destiny to get. And they play BYU this weekend, who sits at 14 right now. That's a really big game. One thing you need to remember about all of this. So we'll talk about the possibility of Ole Miss hosting a playoff game, and the top 4 teams get a bye, and then seeds 5 through 8 host. Right? They host the 9 through 12 teams. So you're thinking, well, Ole Miss just has to make up one more spot to host. That's not the case. Ole Miss has to get to at least number 7 because of how stupid the setup to this college football playoff is. Because you look at the top 4, which would be the byes: Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State. Only 2 of those teams are getting byes. Whoever wins the Big Ten between Oregon and Ohio State will get the bye, or Indiana sitting there at number 5. But I think that's going to be dispatched as of Saturday. Once they travel to Columbus, I expect Ohio State to win that game. So for the sake of this argument, I'm assuming an Ohio State win. So Oregon, Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, only one of those are going to be in the top 4. The other one's going to slide all the way down to 5. Texas at number 3, that's the SEC spot. Obviously, Alabama can still win the SEC championship. I think A&M obviously has a path with that big game coming up at home against Texas next Saturday, assuming they don't blow it on the Plains this weekend against Auburn. But so an SEC team right there. But then you're going to get 2 spots stolen from you after that, because either Boise State or Tulane or Army, whoever comes out of this G5 group, will be a champion. And then whoever comes out of the Big 12, whether it be BYU, Colorado, Arizona State, one of those teams is going to jump into the top 4 to claim one of those spots. Now, you could get helped out a little bit if Miami goes ahead and wins out and jumps into that top 4, because they're sitting at number 8, and that opens up a spot right in front of you. So at this point, if all of that happens, I think Ole Miss has to get to at least number 7 to host a playoff game. And while I don't think it's very likely, one thing that does make me feel a little bit better about it is the committee, in my mind, as an Ole Miss fan, obviously, got it right by putting Ole Miss ahead of Georgia. That was one of the teams that I was afraid would leapfrog us after their big win against Tennessee right there. If we can keep Georgia behind us, we have a sliver of a chance to move up with just a little bit of help. I think Indiana, after this weekend, if they lose to Ohio State, I think they slide behind these SEC teams. They go behind Bama, behind Ole Miss, behind Georgia, probably stays ahead of Tennessee. But I think you're looking at the 9-10 range for Indiana, because there's nothing on that resume that would warrant them being ahead of any of the 10-2 SEC teams, I wouldn't think, because, Georgia has wins at Texas, at home against Tennessee. Ole Miss has wins at South Carolina, at home against Georgia. Alabama with wins at home against Georgia as well. These are teams that have big, shining wins on their resume that Indiana simply won't have if they're not able to knock off Ohio State. So I think we can move up one right there, and then we would just need something else to happen. And I'm telling you, the Army Black Knights could do the Lord's work come this Saturday and knock Notre Dame out of the sucker.
Well, actually, it would be the opposite of the Lord's work, right? Because the Catholic, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen. I think if things are going to be a lot clearer after this weekend, right? You got some really big games with Notre Dame Army. I think we differ in opinion on that one a little bit. I don't have to get into it. But you also have.
But if you do want to hear us get into it, make sure to check out Week 13 winners, which dropped Wednesday at 6 o'clock. It's up on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. You can go back and listen to it and listen to me argue with both Titch and Chad, who both disagree with me.
Well, but one of us has to be wrong. Colorado
maybe
has a good game. Yeah, well, that was the joke. Colorado's got a big one again that I don't know that they thought was going to be a big game here at the end of the year with a Kansas team that has gotten me 2 weeks in a row. I mean, I ain't too proud to say it's gotten me 2 weeks in a row. They're really good right now. So Colorado, I think we kind of see where they end up there. And then the big one I think is BYU Arizona State, which is going to be such a fun game to watch, I think. But it's going to give you a lot of an idea there of which one of those teams is going to end up in that top four that you were talking about as well.
Yeah, so I think when you boil it down, you need Ohio State to beat Indiana, because I'm not sure Ohio State drops behind some of these two-loss SEC teams if they lose to Indiana. I think Alabama jumps them, but I wouldn't be surprised if they kept Ohio State in front of Ole Miss and Georgia at that point. I'd have to go look at the resume, dive into it a little bit deeper to have a more for sure opinion on it. But I think you need Ohio State to beat Indiana to get them behind you, and then you need either Army or USC, who Notre Dame plays next Saturday, to jump up and bite the Irish and knock them out of it. I think that's the path to get Ole Miss a home playoff game in Oxford.
Ohio State, Marshall, Michigan State, Iowa, Oregon, Nebraska, Penn State, Purdue, Northwestern. I
mean, they really only have one win.
At Penn State.
Yeah, that's which if they end up beating Indiana, that'll technically be 2 top 5 wins at that point. But if they don't beat Indiana, kind of to your point, they would have one win against Penn State, obviously being a good one. But then Indiana probably jumps up to like number 2, and you're saying that their 2 losses are against the top 2 teams in the country. It'll be interesting to see how the committee weighs that and how they sort that out with a 2-loss Ohio State team and all these 2-loss SEC teams.
Yeah, I mean, the one bad mark probably on Ohio State's resume is Nebraska at home, 21-17.
They bounced out.
I mean, every other game, right? You just play the schedule that you're given, right? I mean, so every other game they've done what they've needed to do: 49-14, 38-7, 35-7, right? So I mean, they beat the teams they're supposed to beat the way they're supposed to beat them. But if you can point out one thing, you're looking at probably a below average Nebraska team playing pretty well at Ohio State. So that's probably the one I would point out.
Absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see how all that shakes out. One good thing about it, we still got 2 weeks of games to go. More than likely, it's all going to sort itself out. But if not, I'll be interested to see what the committee ends up doing with some of these teams, because they would end up having some hard decisions ahead of them if it basically went chalk from here on out. So that'll be interesting to see. But we'll go ahead and get out of here on that. Me and Hitch will be back with y'all on Sunday like we are after every single Ole Miss football game. We'll recap the Georgia game, and that'll kind of lead us into Egg Bowl week rivalry, or the Florida game, I mean. And then we will that'll lead us into rivalry week and the Egg Bowl, obviously, coming up the following Friday after Thanksgiving. So we will see y'all then at 12 o'clock on Sunday, and we will hopefully rehash another Ole Miss win that will be 1 win away from the college football playoffs. Hitch, appreciate you doing this for me again today, buddy, and we will talk here in a couple days.
Howdy, Toddy.